Thank you. Stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton.
Here.
Mrs. Davis. Here. Mr. Swager.
Here.
Mrs. Thomas. Here. And Mrs. Brewer will be joining us shortly.
Notice of the meeting.
This is a public meeting of the Board of Education for the purpose of conducting the school district's business, and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There's a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes. Upon request of the superintendent, the district shall make reasonable accommodation for a person with a disability to be able to participate in this activity. And we keep a recording of each of these meetings as administrative aid, and we preserve them as documents of the board.
Thank you. Any additions or deletions to the agenda?
We do not have any changes to the agenda.
All right. Motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Call the roll.
Mr. Benton.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis. Yes. Mr. Swager.
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas. Yes.
Any public comments? Yep. All right. On to you, Dr. Wagner.
Sure. So our first presentation tonight is on our K-12 math series adoption, and we thought we'd start tonight. I'll ask Debbie Seibel to help me with this. We thought we'd start tonight showing the board where we are with our math focus. We had a discussion about it last week at the curriculum committee meeting, but we thought it'd be good for the whole board to see it. So we want to start with each of the buildings. I believe they're going to start elementary, and the principals will give you an update about number of students who are participating and how things are going. And then from there, we'll then talk about our actual math series adoption, where we are with that process. So Mrs. Seibel, are we going to ask? Mrs. Wilson will be the first one to go.
Just giving an update with our after-school program. We are focusing on 3rd grade, and we invited 62 students, and we had 44 students participate. We did reach out to the students that were either no's or couldn't participate and tried to find out some reasons why. We did get one more response last week, so we're up to 45, but then we just had a withdrawal. So we're back down to 44. So we had a pretty good high participation rate. We were anticipating about 50 students and ended up with 44. Like I said, we invited 62. And then during the school day, our K through 3 program that's embedded in the school day is up and running. I think we're in our 2nd week for that. It's got a theme called Knock It Out of the Park, which will be kind of launching that out to parents with the help of some teacher point people to help with that next week. But the students are already underway. That's 20 minutes a day of focused math instruction in addition to what they're already receiving with their tiered support and regular curriculum. And so we do have a focus for each one of the grade levels. Kindergarten focusing on knowing when to add and subtract and test taking skills. 1st grade and 2nd grade focusing on word problems and test taking skills, and 3rd grade taking practice state assessments and working on test taking skills as well. So that's kind of what's going on at the elementary with our math focus plan.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Mrs. Smith from the intermediate school.
Good evening. We invited 30 students to attend our after-school or before-school math boot camp. Currently, 25 are attending. I believe we're adding one more this week, and we have a number of names that we're going to send out invitations to at this point. We are going to try to get it so that we have 5 to 6 students per group. So there are some spots to fill. The majority of our spots are all in the morning. We have a large number and only one session in the afternoon after school, and parents preferred that, so it worked out really well. We have 7 teachers. This is twice a week for an hour, either before or after school. And we are also focusing on reviewing content, so kind of a spiral review of information from the beginning of the year, as well as test prep, helping students to understand better the vocabulary of our tests and just what the question is asking, strategies for answering questions, and those kinds of things. It's been very successful so far. In fact, we actually had a student ask what they had to do to join. So that person will be joining us. During the school day, we are also doing some extra things. We have 4 classrooms right now that are participating in a math fact challenge. And when one homeroom, when the homeroom, everyone meets that goal, that homeroom earns a pizza party. And we got to award a pizza party last week to our first homeroom because all of the students had mastered their math facts. So we're excited about that. And we're bringing in another homeroom now of students to join that. So we'll have 5 homerooms that are working on that right now.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mrs. Almendinger for the middle school.
Good evening. So when we met initially to talk about math focus, we met as a math department to decide where we were going to go with that, and what that would look like for our students as far as them getting the max benefit from it. So it was decided at that time that we could get the best pull in if there was a time during the day to make that happen. So we decided to do that during SMART periods, and the math teachers created math focus groups during SMART time. Initially, it was to be only on Mondays and Tuesdays. We would be doing instruction remediation. Mrs. Smith mentioned that spiraling to pick that up. That's part of that. 104 students were invited to do that. Invited, use that term a little loosely. And they, like I said, initially to meet on Mondays, Tuesdays, they're continuing to do that. But once we secured the ALEX program, we decided that we would meet with them on Fridays as well, and they would work on ALEX on Fridays. So those students can still travel on Wednesdays and Thursdays for reteaching and remediation, reassessment, and their other content areas. So we currently had an after-school math tutoring 3 days a week. We have continued with that, but I'm working with Mrs. Matson and Mr. Abbas, who are in charge of that, to kind of redesign what that looks like and what's being offered at that time. We want to continue to offer math support during that time, but we don't want it to be so much a homework help as that offering remediation, targeting students through that data, looking at OST scores and iReady scores. Many of the students who are participating now have a need, and we're going to, what we want to include or expand on is, can we pull more students in to that group, and identifying that need through data, and kind of doing a deeper dig into the students who are our regulars already, and how we can serve them in a better way to go beyond just homework help. So those are some things that are happening at the middle school right now with math focus.
Thank you. Mr. Busenberg for the high school.
Good evening. The program at the high school is for geometry and algebra 1. So far, we're off to what I would call a really good start. The first week we started, we averaged about 10 participants showing up for that. Last week, which was the second week, we got up to 16. We are trying to incentivize students to participate. So one of the things we're doing is a pizza party for any students who attend 10 of the sessions. I think in total there will be about 18 sessions. So if they come to at least 10, they get a pizza party. We're also providing lots of after-school snacks for them, which does work wonders sometimes. So we're happy with the participation up to this point, but we are continuing to do some outreach to get more participation. One of the things we're doing is making phone calls and just calling people who we really would like to be there and we think could get a lot of benefit from that. And then we are also doing a swap with study tables. So study tables after school, if a student is a student athlete, they're placed on study tables. They usually have to serve 90 minutes. We are swapping that out for 60 minutes of math support. So the students probably get a little bit more benefit from that, and they only have to be there after school for 60 minutes. So that's helped our numbers, and I think will continue as spring sports really get into full swing. And I will share that we've already had some positive feedback from parents to the teachers, like, wow, my student has never quite understood this, and that small group time really made a big difference. So yeah, it's good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any questions from the board about that first part of the presentation?
Nope. None for me.
We had curriculum, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, that it's, in a small group, it's even more fun. And it's exciting to see the enthusiasm for all this. We do appreciate the board supporting this, and then this really getting us to focus on math as we move forward. So So then we want to talk a little bit next about our McGraw-Hill, which is our math series. I'm going to hand this off to you. Our McGraw-Hill is our math series that we're recommending to the board, and there's a resolution later tonight. Wanted to review a bit of where we've been, and then we have a couple of representatives from McGraw-Hill. We have Dan, who's here, and we also have
DJ.
DJ. I was going to say, thank you. I was going to do TJ. DJ's here as well too. He's actually in Colorado, so he's participating via Zoom. But if the board has any questions, so wanted to go through and just talk about where we've been with all of this in a timeline. So we have this written down so you can see. Obviously, we're working on a quick pace with this, but we feel it's important as we get ready for the coming school year. So in January this year, we started to review different math materials, and you hear us refer to that Ed Reports, which is a standard document you can look at and you see per state how different textbook series or different series will align with your state standards. So we did that. We then asked some vendors to come in and make some presentations. We kept the list of vendors relatively tight because we used the Ed Reports as our guidance. It didn't make sense for us to bring in, publishers that did not meet the Ohio State standards. And then in February, March, we've had the vendors come in and talk with us, and also to teachers and to administrators. There's been a review of that material, and then through the entire process, after we're all done, the recommendation is for McGraw-Hill to be the math series moving forward. I want to break it down a little bit and just talk to you about grade level, just as a reminder. So when we go through, and I won't read this entire list, but just to frame this, there's a general series that we're looking at. Again, this is a K-12. Mr. Budenberg talked about the high school, so we only would have a few classes at the high school, and we'll have to supplement with some other materials because the series will only go up through Algebra 2 geometry. Right? Yeah. So there's a core series that's adopted, and then what you'll see is there's what's called an adaptive program, and that's for some students who need some extra help along the way. And then we get into tiered supports from there too. So those could be students that are more significantly behind in some different areas. That can be for different reasons. As we think about potential for our school districts to grow, and L2, we're going to have students eventually that will not have the benefit of a K-12 Johnstown education. So we're going to need some intersections where we can bring students up to speed. So this helps us think about in the future. So at the K-3 level, we have print volumes 1 and 2. There's a practice book. All of the series throughout this, or the entire series K-12, has a digital access component. So I'll repeat that. You'll hear about an adaptive software, and this is a software that we talked about that what it does is generally, when a student is struggling, we can have them work within the software, and we can see, before we advance vertically, what needs to be filled in horizontally. So, you start there and then you work your way up, and then that way we're just not vertically mastering or vertically advancing students without some mastery there. So we're looking at that. So that at your K at 3 levels called Redbirds. We have teacher resources, and will professional development be important. Similar items in grades or in the 4 through 8 program, digital access. You'll hear a different program called ALEKS, ALEKS. That's been a software program been around for a while, and very similar to Redbirds, as I said. So that's your adaptive software. So you have teacher resources, professional development. Many of these items are consumable at this level from the elementary through the middle school. And then when you get to the high school, we actually have some hardcover sets, and I believe we're going to order about 35 for each classroom so that you'll have a core set for the students. And then we have some that we can lend out, or can be taken offsite or outside the classroom if we need it, even inside the building. Similar to others, teacher resources, professional development, digital access. Available there too. As I said, we're going to be looking for statistics and some other resources. There's tiered solutions. I alluded to this before. So we have a level 1, 2, and 3 tier. Your level 1 is going to start in your classroom, but then you get into levels 2 and level 3. Sometimes that can involve special education or at-risk students, but we'll work on that individually. So you'll see that there'll be references to Number Worlds, which is one of the middle tier that provides support. So that's in grades K through 8. Connecting Math Concepts is our tier 3, so that's for the more significant needs. And we also have corrective math for grades 6 through 8. And then we have like a developmental course in algebra for grades 8 and 9. If the board approves this tonight, then we will actually start with professional development. Our next day is this Friday. So in anticipation of this, we had our 2 finalists get ready with professional development so that we can start to get this in teachers' hands. It'll be about 2 hours to get us started. Questions, anything? I know we've gone through this relatively quick in a timeline, but comprehensively.
Questions? No, I just appreciate all the work and I'm excited for where we're going with it. So I appreciate it.
Okay.
I agree. Ann and I, had a curriculum committee meeting last week with all of the administrators, and they were talking about teachers being excited. They themselves were excited, and I know we sort of had our 2 finalists, but I think it was very clear cut that this was the way the district, saw us moving, and so I think that that's great that there's sort of unanimously everyone's really looking forward to this and implementing it, and I'm really excited to see next year how it all looks.
DJ, I know you're from Colorado. Anything we missed or anything more we should talk about? I know you've been a great resource and you have that larger national, including Ohio.
I just say the one thing I would mention, guys, and let me just ask, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, just the one thing I would say, when we talk about adaptive software going along with the core program, research still shows that the number one factor in the achievement of the student is that classroom teacher. Mm-hmm. And so the addition of some of the software that we've been able to create over the last 15, 20 years is not to replace that teacher. But as a former math teacher myself, when I had 30 kids in my classroom, they were at 30 different places in their math journey. Mm-hmm. And that's the power of putting the core curriculum together with a software that supports every single student where they're at. So we just appreciate the effort that's gone in on it by the adoption committee, and then also the opportunity to partner with you in making sure that the teachers have the resources they need to implement this well and really impact their students.
So I think that's it unless you have questions. So really, go ahead.
On the professional development, I know one of the things that I think it was Mrs. Wilson brought up was how important the monthly Zooms were, and another curriculum that we adopted last year. And I just wondered, does McGraw-Hill have something like that they can meet on a monthly basis with the teams?
Yeah, what we're going to do is, and that's a great question actually, because we've been talking as a team, and we want to make sure that our journey doesn't end tonight if the board approves this. And really, we have to talk about implementation next. So we'll start with our professional development day on Friday, and it'll be good to get the actual materials in teachers' hands. But then we'll have a cadence or a process moving forward. One of the things that we will be doing, and we'll get you a schedule, because we didn't even tell McGraw-Hill until late last week that this was moving forward. So. But what we'll do is get you a schedule and show you the professional development. I think a part of this also, and I know we've talked about this curriculum, I think a little bit at the board level, entire board, but I do think we need some additional supports to help us with this. We're going to be talking to the Licking County Educational Service Center, possibly some others, about supports that can be provided. That could be in the form of math coaches to help. We're looking for people who are understanding of this, very conversant with the McGraw-Hill series, and can actually go in and provide as a consultant, provide model lessons if needed. So there's going to be a larger process we'll have, and I think by April we'll be coming back to the board. We'll have another curriculum committee meeting and talking about what those next steps are after this Friday.
Okay, good. That was one thing that has been circling in my mind since we had that conversation.
Yeah.
So just want to make sure.
Because in order to do this, there's a lot with implementation, and I think that's even the greater responsibility we have. I mean, we're going to get everyone aligned K-12, and we have to do this relatively short period of time. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or anything we can answer? If there's none, then later on tonight, we'll have a resolution. It is rather substantial, the cost from where we've been with this. The cost you'll see tonight is just over $308,000 for this program or this series. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but when we're an entire school district, we're going to be adopting K-12. The other thing I will tell you is we may have some other small additions we need. We're going to look and see when we get this, when we get ready to really launch this next year with the students, there's going to be some assessments, and depending on where those students fall in the assessments, we may need to buy some additional support, so it might come back a little bit more, but we feel confident that $308,000 will get us the major portion, if not all of it, and I'll keep the board updated.
And did we address Mrs. Wagner's questions that she had the other day? I think Debbie and
We
her are
did,
still working
yeah.
on this. Okay.
She and Mrs. Seibel worked together for parts of 2 days, had the representatives. We actually had, from McGraw-Hill, we actually had one more confirmation that came in around 4 o'clock today, just to make sure everything was good. That's why I'm saying, just from a transparency standpoint of the board, until we get assessments for some of the students, it might be more students in tier 3, tier 2, and then there might be a few items here or there. I have some spending authority, but this is the best we can project right now. Yeah, that's really, Mrs. Wagner's been a good member of the team here, working with all the principals. So,
Excellent.
else we
Thank
can
you.
answer?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the McGraw-Hill folks, and you're welcome
Thanks.
to stay
Thank
if
you.
you want, but otherwise I know you have other things to do. So,
Thanks for inviting us.
thank you. Next, we want to talk about the 5-year forecast, and Mrs. Pulley will get us started with that. Just while she's getting that organized, public school district has the responsibility to look at a forecast twice during, we have an adoption in the fall, and then there'll be a reconciliation of that in May. The board's required to adopt. The thing that's interesting is when you go through this process, as we get ready for May, we know more now. So, for example, we have curriculum adoption that we just talked about for over $300,000. And then we're going to look at adoption in other areas as well, too. So you will see, eventually we'll get on a cycle. So we'll look at science and ELA, language arts and social studies. So those are in this forecast. We also know what our healthcare costs are. This mic drop out? Putting me out, right?
Because you're taking all my stuff.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I won't say anything. Okay.
It's Kim over there pushing the button.
Yeah. Okay.
Is this, I can't really see this. Is this okay? So as Dr. Wagner mentioned, we did pass our 5-year forecast in November, and this is an update, more information, not only in district costs, but we've also been able to see some enrollment projection and some live birth data that's really guiding some changes within this forecast from the fall. So the first thing I really want to point out and mention, this is very important to know, we have to forecast, even though we have 2 renewal levies on the ballot, we have our emergency levy and our income tax levy. Both of those are up for renewal, but we have to do the forecast as if they do not pass. So this is our view as if they don't. There is a spot down at the bottom where it brings back in if they do pass what it looks like, but for the forecast purposes, we have to assume that they do not. So one thing I do want to point out, I don't know if any of you have heard much about House Bill 1. This is something that's before the state right now. The state wants to adopt a flat income tax and cut all the tax rates. And their method of doing this and funding that is a shift in how they are paying property taxes. So that's still, it's in committee hearings right now. It's not finalized. Not sure where it's actually going to go. So that is not included in this forecast. If it were included, it's actually a negative impact on us. So it could look different once we know more about that. You can see our income tax is our most significant. We're projecting just over $5 million in this school year to receive. And because that levy is on the ballot this year, you can see where it starts to fade off if it does not pass. Grants, this is the foundation money. The current budget bill, they are projecting to continue to phase in the Fair School Funding Plan, which is good news. So that is going to help us maintain the levels of funding that we would be getting from the state. Other operating revenues, this is kind of hard for us because we're a conservative district. We don't like to do anything until we have checks in hand. We don't like to do anything until we know for sure. So projecting what Intel may or may not bring for us is really difficult. So this is kind of a conservative estimate based on if they open in the summer of 25, as they have said. If that changes, that'll influence this forecast as well. But this is the best available data we have at this time. And it's a moving target. It's very hard to forecast. On the expenditure side, personal services and employee benefits are our two biggest, as you would expect. Those are our teachers and their benefits. We are planning for growth in this forecast, not only because people are moving into the district. We also see live birth data. We wondered if there would be a COVID bubble, and it turns out that there is. We had a pretty high birth rate in 2020 and 2021. We're projecting 2 pretty large kindergarten classes coming through in the next few years. So there's additional growth built in for those. Theoretically, those teachers would just then follow through, moving from kindergarten to first grade to second grade, and so on. But we're projecting growth at about a 1% rate, which is what we knew pre-Intel. So that could change too. Purchase services. One of our biggest costs in this area is transportation. So again, as we grow, potentially we could be adding additional routes each year. We have budgeted for 1 additional route a year for growth. Supplies and materials, this is where we would do the curriculum adoption. So the $300,000 that Dr. Wagner just mentioned a few minutes ago, that's included here. And a similar amount each year as we potentially cycle through science and social studies, English language arts, and then begin a cycle. These transfers, some of them, a small amount of them is for maintenance of stadium turf, other facility maintenance parking lot repaving, things that we don't want to have to pay all in one year. So we set aside a little amount each year for those. But the biggest dollar amount is this board has been committed that we don't want to have to go back for a levy to build a building. Or if we do have to, it's going to be as small a dollar amount as possible. So we are setting aside additional money each year to hopefully not have to do that. This is a change from November in the amount. We've always been setting aside the money. The amount has changed because since that forecast, we've seen enrollment data that looks like the high school may reach capacity sooner than we had originally thought. So that building is probably sooner rather than later as we originally had hoped it would be. So with all of that said, this blue line is the projected fund balance. So you can see with all of that being said, we are projecting without those levies being renewed, we're projecting a negative fund balance in year 4 and obviously a larger one in year 5. Down here at the bottom, you can see what those levies do for us. The renewal levies by year 5 is $8 million cumulatively. So if we do pass those levies, our fund balance will be positive. It'll be a little over $6 million in year 5. So, questions?
Can you explain to everyone, when you look at the drop off of the one surplus in 2022, 2025, can you explain to everyone why that happens because of the half year revenue stream, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Because of the way the revenue stream comes in when the levies
Yes.
expire.
Yes. Right. So,
So that's why you see the first drop off and the second drop off because of the way you collect it.
correct. So for the income tax, for example, even though it expires December 31st, 2023, that will get collected in 2024 because that's obviously the collection year for it. And then the property tax is also a year behind. So you will see that start to drop off a little bit, not right away, but we do have a little longer because it's a year behind.
Then also, can you explain to them, you alluded to the fact that House Bill 1 and the impact that's going to have to go on the schools, the financial impact is significant, right? So it's not an insignificant thing where the schools are going to be losing money from the state. So can you talk to them as it's written today, the impact that funding loss?
Yeah, House Bill 1 is actually interesting because it not only affects the school district, it affects each individual taxpayer. So like I said, they want to have a flat tax rate of 275. To pay for that, if you're a property tax owner, if you've ever looked at your property tax bill, there's a 10% rollback is what it's called. And the state pays that share of your property tax bill for you. For them to fund the income tax reduction, they want to shift that 10% back to the property taxpayer. So what they're saying is you will have a decrease in your income tax, but you'll have an increase in your property tax. In order to offset that, because they don't want to give you just a straight property tax increase, they want to reduce your current assessed value that you pay property taxes on is 35% of your home value. They want to reduce that amount to 31.5% of your home value. So you'll pay more property taxes on a lesser amount. Theoretically, that would balance out, except it doesn't. Because House Bill 920, if you're familiar with this at all, the same process right now, for example, say a levy collects $5 million for us. No matter how much growth we have, that levy can't collect more than $5 million. So each year, the effective rate, if it was a 5 mils, the effective rate goes down. So it could be 3 mils now generates that amount of money. Unfortunately, House Bill 20 works in reverse. So if the taxable value across the district goes down, that levy still has to generate $5 million. So now you as an individual taxpayer, your tax will go up to generate that $5 million. So having said that, now the question is, well, how are we going to lose money? Because theoretically, taxes are going to come up to pay for that. Not all levies are House Bill 20 eligible. We have certain levies that are unvoted that the county assigns to us that are not 920 eligible. So any money from that, we will lose the revenue off of those mills. So House Bill 1 is a decrease in revenue to the school district and an increase in tax payments to the homeowners. So that's why I'm not sure where it's going to go, because I don't think the General Assembly's intention is to raise taxes on property value or raise taxes to their tax base that significantly. So we're watching it. That's why it's not included, because we don't know.
There's still more,
But
sorry.
it's still going to have, if it goes through the way they have it planned, it's going to have a major impact.
Yes, it's about $300,000 a year to Johnstown.
And it's hundreds of millions for the entire state. So it's a significant impact on schools statewide.
And not just schools, it's an impact to the city. It would be an impact to the county. Any taxing entity would have the same issue.
Are there still being amendments offered to House Bill 1?
It's in committee right now,
That's what I thought.
so I think they just had a hearing on it last week, and I think there's another one scheduled for, I'm not sure when, coming up soon.
Kim, can we just review a couple of things here? I don't know if this mic is going to keep going out. My eyes are always drawn to that 7.02 line of cash balance. And so I just want to underscore a couple things, because I know we're closely with you, but just so everyone is clear. So what you're looking at is we have obviously projections in 23, because we won't settle this until June 30th of this year, and the projections out. So as you go out and you look, and I guess, it's clear, make sure it's clear that this is if the levies don't pass. I know House Bill 1's a consideration, but we don't know what's going to happen with that. It's a serious consideration. But we are negative in year 2026. So that means for the 25-26 school year, we're negative almost $1 million.
Correct.
And then if you go out the following year, we're negative $14.7 million.
Correct.
My eyes are equally drawn to to line 6.01 because there's our deficit spending, and you can see it starts in actually by June, well, actually the 23-24 school year. So you can see there's $1 million there, and then it just continues cascade over, which is understandable if we don't have the additional levies. Looking at expenditures, having done this for a few years, schools are very heavy with personnel because we're a people business. So you're going to look at 70-some%, depending on your school district, typically is going to be in personnel. And so we think about teachers, bus drivers, we have contracted costs in here. So, I'm concerned when I see this. I just want to make sure everyone understands this as we look at this. I mean, you go out, for 25-26 school year, which is going to be August of 25, isn't that far away, and we're $1 million short. And then you go, the following year, but it's almost 14. It's 14.7, almost $15 million. So if we have to balance a budget, those are significant numbers that we need to think about. There's, stating the obvious, this is personnel heavy. So I appreciate that we have curriculum adoption in here, and that's just over $1.5 million over the 5 years, but that's not significant enough to cover a whole of $14.7 million.
And that doesn't even address the growth issue when we're looking at how do we house the students and the number at the 1% growth currently.
Yeah.
How we're going to house those students, and if we're out of room at the high school or close to it, we're going to be looking at more space, obviously, and that costs money. And our last school was over $20 million, the elementary school. So if that kind of rings into that $7 million that looks like we had some money, that doesn't go very far. So,
well, that's interesting because we were talking about that, Mrs. Brewer, and we were thinking, okay, you got $14 million in 26-27 school year, you got 7.8 there, but that's still not going to close your gap enough. I mean, and then they're taking all your facilities that you're saving, those monies, and you're trying to push them into operations, and that's not going to close that gap either. It's just I bring this up because it makes me worry when I see these things, and it's not like the sky is falling on this, but these are significant deficits as they go through, and it's emblematic of what we have are two levies that are side by side, and that they're have a great impact on a school district. There's no staging on this because they're 1 year apart from one another, and would try to get those renewed this May. So,
well, along with the bricks and mortar concern would be the student-teacher ratio too. If we're growing at that percentage, we don't have teachers to cover that enormous growth either. So it's a delicate balance, and we work very hard. I think our track record is good. We want to keep it that way, but when we ask for renewal of a bond issue, or an operating levies, that certainly speaks loud and clear to me. I've watched a lot of issues come and go. We cannot let this go. We must renew our levies. So that's my thought for this evening. And for those of you who know me well, nobody's more conservative than I. But when I see the writing on the wall, I see the train coming down the track. So thanks for thinking about it.
And we want to thank everyone for supporting the levies. Get out there and try to support it, because as a member of the finance committee, we have to take a look at our future, right? And we have to plan on our future. You can see we have a 5-year forecast. So it's imperative that we pass these levies, because we just don't have the money. Everyone talks about Intel's going to do this, Intel's going to do that, but without the levies, we don't have a bridge to get to there. So we need everyone that is happy with the progress that the school has made over the past few years to get out there and talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, and help us pass this money.
Mrs. Pulley, with Intel, I think we have, is it $750,000 for the sale of the land? Is that
Correct.
That's included in here right now? So we
Correct.
do have that realized so far. So that is actually the greatest questions I get is, people think the money is here and it's not. We do have, $750,000 is a lot, but you can see overlaying this on a forecast isn't going to be that substantial when you have this.
Correct. That was
this level of need.
On the most recent tax abstract, the December 31st, 2022, that the county auditor did bring that sale on. And because that is just land, that is money, or that is property value that will not be abated.
I know we have to be neutral in what we say about levies, especially if there's different interpretations. But, at some point, depending on what happens this year, we'll have to talk about deficit spending because, again, by the 23-24 school year, there's $1 million there and that grows. So, if we're not successful in what we need to this year, then we're going to have to talk about with the board. We'll have to get a work session and talk about, what we're going to do to try and close that gap because you can see that pull through the forecast and it's just too significant to surmount at some point without it being catastrophic to the school district.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Ms. Pooley.
Thank you.
Board committee updates. And do you have any on building and grounds you'd like to share?
No, I think we have one coming up though.
Okay.
I think we have a meeting coming up.
Yep.
But we don't have any. Everything's been good.
Okay, thank you. Ruth Ann, you had communications meeting?
We did have a communications meeting. We didn't resolve anything. We just brought up a lot of issues. We obviously continue to look at the Miles estate, but as far as setting any plans forward, we're a little reactionary at the moment because we get data every day on that issue. I'm not sure of anything that we brought up that we want to talk about at this point. We looked at branding. We looked at how
Say
we
branding's
can
probably
image
the
our
biggest
school.
thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
I think the last celebrations we talked about, right?
Yes,
I
we
mean,
did.
considering what has been established already, I mean, with Mr. McDonald's help, we have a very strong social media platform that's been built. So do appreciate all those efforts. Communications significantly improved this year. Next step is the website's taking a little longer than expected. We talked about that. And we have a beta site that's running in the background now, and we're not quite ready. We thought maybe we might be able to launch that by January, February. It's taking a little longer. We'd rather do it right.
And if you haven't looked at the Facebook page, et cetera,
Yeah.
on what our communications director has been working on, Craig has done a phenomenal job. And I enjoy looking at it several times. It doesn't matter how many times I see the students talking to the superintendent or whatever it might be, programs that we're having. I feel like I'm better informed than I've ever been. So hats off to the communication director who's back there. Thanks, Craig. And to the superintendent who's always thinking up new ideas. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, so more to come we'll have for the board come up in the future. We'll need more of these meetings because, again, website rebranding, as you mentioned. So we want to get some standardization in our colors and our messaging and everything that we have for the district, especially as we look to grow. And actually, while we're saying that, we actually have reached out to the boosters as well too. So we're going to make sure we're coordinated there. Our branding company that we're using is also has a survey, so we're sharing that with some of our groups too, so we can get input, so that we have standardization across it.
Thank you. Amanda, anything on curriculum?
I think we've pretty much covered most of the curriculum. I mean, the focus has been looking at the math series, and Ann and I'm going to just say for you, but wonderful conversations with administrators. It's been a really great process. I know you guys put a lot of time and effort into the math series, and we appreciate it. And I think the only thing else is that we're just going to start looking at what's next. Now that we've got math done, what's next?
What is it?
English.
Yeah, we did talk about that. The one thing that
Science?
we'll have another curriculum
Science?
committee meeting probably before the next board meeting. Okay. One of the things that's happening in the state, I'll just give you a little preview, is that the governor's come out and talked about the science of reading. So I think you're going to see more flex there. Initially, we had our cadence would be English, language arts, and science, and then social studies. I think we might flip that so that we don't get too far down a path and have to change. So I think next year we'll be looking at science, and then the ELA will continue with our foundations and other efforts. But we'll more to update as we have our next curriculum meeting and we know more.
Alan, anything additional on finance? Obviously, you just went over.
Does everyone realize that your forecast is a living document? As things change, we have to change the way we view the school system because we have to be financially responsible. So just so that everyone knows that, you know, we have to deal with what we have, right? And make decisions based on how much funding we have. That's the school district.
Alan, I think I'd like to add, since I'm on that finance committee too, it's nice to have a finance committee because we do spend time reviewing it with the treasurer, reviewing our finances with the treasurer. So it isn't just at the meeting that you see us reacting to whatever we see because we've already been over it several times. If we can squeeze the penny, we're doing it. So, but we're also being very mindful of delivering a quality education. And we've always done that. And we're even going to do better when we see the curriculum changes that are being made and the studies that are happening. That's something I've not seen in the district for a long time. And that is an exciting thing. It's including teachers, administrators, board members. It's just a wonderful time to be around Johnstown-Monroe schools right now as we grow.
If I can add, I'm also very excited about the finance committee, but I geek out over stuff like that. So.
We need you to geek out.
Keep that printing press going, Kim.
And I see you have an insurance in a few weeks. Yeah. Okay. Anything additional on policy?
I was going to say, I think policy, our last one, we just are sort of revisiting things that we've already been looking at, just sort of fine tuning some language. And then we're sort of going through certain things chronologically. And then we've got a couple more things that are sort of time sensitive and relevant that we're pulling out. But I don't think any major things that we're.
No, I
planning
need to
on.
get another meeting scheduled too. That's on my list of to-do items. But we've been trying to follow a refresh cycle, but then there's some priorities that we're working on. So those priorities take a little deeper. One of the things, for example, when it seems relatively easy, but the whole suspension, expulsion that the board approved last time, the follow-up and the paperwork that's needed with that, there are literally, I'm not exaggerating, 8 different forms that associate with that. So we have to make sure that all those are accurate, that we follow that process, then that it could impact your, most likely will impact your handbooks. We have to get ready for next year. You also think about any other procedures that we have. So there's just a lot of detail, kind of to your point, Mrs. Board. There's other things that go on behind the scenes. So we're moving. It's just not probably as fast as we want in some cases, but we're trying to prioritize and we're getting some things done. But I have to read. That's on me. That's been sitting with me for a few days, but I will get the next meeting scheduled.
The strategic planning, economic development, we've spoken a bunch about this and we're trying to set up the meeting. I don't think we've got a firm date on that.
No.
Ruth Ann, just to give you a heads up, we're trying to set a date, and that's with us in the city of Johnstown, meeting together. So we've exchanged a few emails back, just trying to solidify that date. And then, Alan, anything additional on technology?
Technology, our big concern is our servers ending lifespan. So we've got 6 years out of the current server. So we have to make a decision as to what do we want to do in the future. Do we want to get a new server, or do we want to use a hosting service that will keep our data in 2 separate locations and back up each time? Then the other thing that we talked about was the excellent care that the students have given to our one-to-one computers. We've had very, very little reported damage. And we want to thank all the students. We want to thank the parents for training their students to respect the equipment that's here at school. And we want to thank the staff for ensuring that everything is maintained. So I know I speak for Amanda, who's on the committee with me, and the entire board, but we want to thank you for that.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, on to the consent agenda.
Ready? Do you want me to, I'll read the resolution. 23-03-035 is consent agenda.
Can we get a motion?
I'll motion. A second.
Mr. Schwager, can I go through and highlight some of these? Okay. The first one is on contract extensions. So it's for Debbie Seibel and Janet Smith. We're going to ignore the next resolution for them, but this does get us to some retirement discussions. So it's an extension for Mrs. Seibel through July. Her contract typically ends at the end of June. And then for Mrs. Smith, nearly the end of August, which is August 29th. There's no questions. I'll keep going. The next one is, we've talked before about school psychologists, and later on you'll see a resolution where we're asking the board to pick up a 0.5 school psychology position. The idea there is to move from some contracted services to our regular personnel lines, if you will. So I believe that Sidra will most likely, if she resigned full-time, but interested because it best meets her family needs. So you'll see that later on. Amy, wow, I've not known her very long, but I'm looking, and if I'm accurate, she's been in the district 25 years. So that's quite an accomplishment, and think about all the number of students she's seen and stories she could tell and all. So I think that's significant. I mean, you just don't see that sometimes where that person's giving that much time. Jan, kind of interesting. I was looking at her history with the district, and it often starts coming in sub a little bit, and it's just a little bit here and there, and then one thing leads to another, and pretty soon you're working for the district. So she started as a substitute from 2005 to 2009, and then we actually hired her as a regular employee since 2009, and she's worked ever since, and paraprofessional, and she's been the elementary principal's secretary since 2014. So obviously a lot of loss there as well too. I guess we're going to have to talk about these next two, but Debbie and Janet are on there too, but different dates. Like I said, kind of the previous aspects of this resolution. So we have one at the end of July for Debbie, and then Janet at the end of August. Marcy's there and has another opportunity, and then we have. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just kind of going through some of the quick. Sorry, I didn't go through everyone.
I don't want
But
to miss Amy.
yeah, no, Amy's there as well too, so I didn't want to miss her. She's a paraprofessional who's resigning, and then same thing with our track coach Dan Whitmer at the end too. So no
Can we
question.
vote no on these? Or?
Yeah, well, we can pull out the resolutions if you want. We'd have to pull them apart. I figured there'd be some discussion about that. The next aspect of the consent is on track and field, and actually the two coaches are switching positions, so that's why you'll see that. We have next for pupil activity, we have Levi for varsity lacrosse. Thank you to the board again for getting that forward so earlier in the year. So now we'll have our first varsity head coach position, and then here's
Scrimmaging now.
right. And then Dan Whitmer for high school track and field. Volunteers who we always appreciate. So we have Kyle, Matt, and AJ. You can see for baseball, softball, and baseball. So we appreciate their support. Unpaid leaves, we won't talk about anything specific there, but sometimes there's a need for some staff to get unpaid. Did I miss? I didn't see that.
That's why I laughed. All right.
Did I miss something?
It was just an inside joke. That,
Okay.
Inside joke.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to
Made
go
me
quick for
laugh.
somebody. Treasurer's reports. So Kim, anything specific you want to talk about with that? Or, as a matter of fact, board minutes. I think the board's had an opportunity to review those. Permanent appropriations. We're always, as talked about earlier, kind of reconciling and adjusting items. So a lot of detail there, but I know the board's seen some of this in finance, and this is a large group. So if there's no questions, additional questions, that is the consent agenda.
All right. Questions, comments, going around the table?
Just want to thank them for their time and dedication to the students and the community, really. It all goes together. So thank you.
Thank you all. I'm
Yeah.
still stuck on no.
Yeah, well, I'm happy for everyone because it's an exciting time to retire and to move on. And it's a scary time, but I'm also sad because some of you I've known for so many years, and it makes me feel really old, right? Which is not a good thing because I
Speak
am
for
really
yourself.
old, right? Because I am really old, right? But it's sad. It's saddened to me, right? It's sad, right, to see friends leave, and I consider many of you are my friends, so it's sad. But I'm happy for you, but it's sad at the same time.
Very well said, Alan.
I will tell you that some people are interested maybe subbing when they come back. So we don't
I always mention that.
Yeah, well,
we always have
we've
some.
already had some discussion about take a little time to breathe. And then
Right,
you can,
right.
Like a week.
Yeah, like, you can
Just
not
a
come to
week.
convocation and
June, July, we'll see you early August.
Yeah.
Let us get settled in for the first week, but then, we would like for you to come back.
And then I sent a message to the staff about some of the administrators, but, Marcy's going on to Licking County Educational Service Center, but we think there's an opportunity to continue working with Marcy. She's done an outstanding job in many areas, including literacy, and we're talking about some work there. Janet has expressed some interest in maybe taking a little time off and helping the district out. And Debbie also, we're talking about a part-time next year for her because we need help with curriculum. We talk a lot about that in technology, so those will be your areas of focus. So I think you'll still see some of your friends, Alan. Won't lose them all. And Amy.
It's a two-way street. They have to be friends with him. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry.
Well, I know I'm still the new person, but it does speak to the special nature of what happens in this school district, though, because it is hard to let go.
And another
and I
one we'll
think
miss
people
was
want-
Amy Schultz. We're going to
Yeah.
miss her talents.
Yeah.
We've obviously gone through a lot of them, all of you. I know you know how I feel about you. I could get emotional, but I'll try not to. But at any rate, we did pass up Amy Schultz when we first read the list, so.
No,
don't
that's
forget
excellent.
her.
That's a lot of service years and a lot of
Mhm.
experience we're losing, especially all in one
Absolutely.
meeting. That's
Mhm.
scary to lose that much at once. But I do appreciate everything that each of them have done throughout the years.
No.
No. If anyone asks for next meeting, the answer is no.
We've reached our principal limit of. That is true. All right. Well, with all of that, the usual thank yous to all the pupil activities and supplemental folks that volunteer or take minimally paid positions to work with our student athletes. So those positions are certainly appreciated as well. And beyond that, I do again thank each and every one of the employees that we're going to unfortunately vote on here for accepting resignations. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Next one.
Yes.
Resolution 23-03-06 is our donations.
If I can get a motion.
I'll motion.
A second.
These are the donations from Master Fair for the honor roll shirts, the Johnstown class of 2022 gifting the excess funds to the class of 24, an anonymous donation for the 8th grade DC trip, a Cindy Reeves for Ripley's Believe It or Not book, Beth Stafford for the 2 signed books for the elementary school library, and Molly Orsini for her donation to purchase author visit books for the students. So all of those, as you see through there, are, again, much like our volunteers and our coaches, this is what makes this town and this school district work, are the donations of many people and businesses in the community. So we do appreciate that. Any other comment or questions? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-037. It's early graduation, and we have 4 students. We have Johanna, Silas, Colton, and Isabella.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Can we get a second?
Second?
Any questions or comments? They've satisfied all theirs. And
I have a question.
Yep.
And I think I asked this last year, but I can't remember and I apologize.
I won't remember. It's okay.
he didn't watch last year's.
Will the graduates, if we approve them tonight, will they be able to walk in May with their class?
Yes.
They're just graduating
Yes.
early because they've met the requirements.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Well,
Excellent.
congratulations to those students.
Certainly.
Congratulations.
Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-038. It's a math adoption series for the 23-24 school year. And this is a motion. I'll read a little bit more. So this is a motion for the board to approve Reveal Math K-12 by McGraw-Hill for at least 5 years at a cost not to exceed $8,000, sorry. Said it earlier.
That's right, that accounts. Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Further discussion? All right. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-039. This is an interesting one for the board. There are Ohio revised code language about how we have to address teachers' contracts and all too. So a staff member, a teacher's requesting that she terminated her contract early. So that has some consequences to it. So what we're asking the board to do is acknowledge receipt of the request and not formally, ostensibly not formally voting for it, but you would acknowledge it, and then that'll allow us to move forward and let her move forward with her experiences outside of education that she's trying to address.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Just to be clear, we're accepting, by voting yes, we're acknowledging the receipt of it, but we're not accepting, correct? I just want to make
Yes.
sure the way I'm voting on
Yes,
this. Okay.
that's absolutely correct. And then that'll allow everyone to move forward, but there's some
Correct.
procedures we have to follow. Yes.
Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-040, and this is open enrollment for the 23-24 school year. So what this allows is continuation of what we've done in the past, at least for the 23-24 school year, where we would have no open enrollment grades K through 8, and that we would have open enrollment for grades 9 through 12 based on our current policy.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any further discussion? We know what this one is.
How does it affect if we do not pass the levy? Would we have to go back and look at this again?
We've already, as I understand it, at this point, we're already accepting applications for next year.
We will next
So-
month. Yeah.
Right. So before
Yeah.
that, so I think he would have to do it the year after if you wanted to have that conversation.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Yep.
clear.
But that's a good question because there is a finite amount of time we accept, so we'll know how many students, and then again, there's a cap. So
Any other questions? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
next resolution is 23-03-041. This is open enrollment for the 24-25 school year, and this resolution is one the board hasn't seen in some time. So what this would do is this would end 9th grade open enrollment for the 24-25 school year. So based on conversations we've had through some committees and all, this was a suggestion we bring in front of the board. The idea here is that as we start to enroll students next month, that there'll be plenty of lead time. So you're going to see almost a year and a half, well, at least a year early, that this won't be an option in 9th grade. And then by the future, most likely we'll be fading this out into future years as well too. So I would expect that we'll want to fade 10th grade and on up. This is really kind of gets more to the issue about growth and facility needs, and especially at the high school, but it could be all the buildings.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? We're all on understanding what we're doing here as far as growth and giving parents that would consider open enrollment essentially 16, 18 months to move into the district. So this is being proactive to know where we're going. Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
And we're trying to, we have limited space, right? So it's a space issue. So the high school is projected to run out of room. So this is a way for us to help this situation away.
Thank you. Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-042 on kindergarten screening.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Can we get a second?
Second.
So yearly, we obviously engage in a kindergarten screening process. This will allow us to have 9 teachers ready to work to support that process, and we're getting ready for the 23-24 school year, and the cost per day is $210.
Discussion, questions? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-043, residency and attendance services.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
This resolution is kind of unique, but it would allow us to partner with the Licking Heights local school district. They have a two-thirds time residency officer. And the idea here is that we would get about 10 days of service from Licking Heights, and we've already organized this arrangement with them. It's a cost of $75 an hour, and it could start as early as tomorrow and then take us through June 30th. I know we talked about this briefly at another board meeting, but the idea here is we've run through our set of tools, and I think that we need to now take it to the next level, and we need more tools available. So this will be someone who can help us a little deeper research when there's residency concerns. It also, we could do home visits with this, and some other aspects that we can dig a little deeper now. It's not to cast aspersions against anyone, but Mrs. Thomas, when you asked the question about enrollment, and we talk about it, this is something we need to make sure everyone who's in the schools really has the proper paperwork and the bearings to be here. So we're going to make sure that happens. So this will be an opportunity for us to dig a little deeper, and then we'll give some updates to the board as if you approve this tonight, and in the future we'll have more updates to review. Oh, you didn't?
Did I get a motion and second on this one?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Amanda motioned,
I was like,
seconded.
whoa, whoa.
Going fast. I didn't catch it either.
I got a little nervous.
Do that.
Nah, no, we're good. We've discussed this at length. Again, this is much in line with what we're doing on the open enrollment. This is just making sure that we reserve space in our classrooms for residents of this district and make sure that, capacity issues and that aren't exceeded, and that people that live and attend our school meet the criteria of living in our school district. So this would just enforce that and allow us an opportunity to confirm those correct students are here.
Question. What's the reporting mechanism on that? Will we see monthly reports, cumulative report? How do you see the reporting mechanism on this investment?
That's a good question. I can give updates in the weekly report to the board, and it won't be every week, but we can give
That's
updates.
all right.
We actually do some of that work right now, so we have some cases but this will be a little deeper. Yeah, we can definitely give an update. I used to give these in my last district publicly at the board meeting. Bigger district, but in the course of a short period of time, it was a couple of years there, we had over 300 students that we were able to clean up and make sure that they needed to be in the district. So I don't think the numbers be anywhere high for us, but yeah, I'll definitely give the board updates.
Thanks.
And it's a funding issue too. It's not only a space, but a funding issue. So if you have 300 students that are not supposed to be in your school district going to your school, you're funding the education for those 300 students without any revenue stream coming in. So it goes both ways. It's funding and it's also space.
Good point. Thank you. Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-044, dyslexia training stipend.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
We talked about Mrs. Wilson before, and these next two resolutions are ones that she's really helped to champion. So this is an area that's required by the state, and we want to make sure that we have all of our teachers who need to be, especially at elementary level, where they're, have to work with every child and you don't have specialization or departmentalization. So we want to make sure all the teachers meet the criteria, and this will help us achieve that.
Any other questions, comments on this? We discussed it at length before. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-045, Wilson Level 1 certification stipend.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
This one, I'll just talk about quickly, but this is the next level for us. So this allows us to have staff certified in Wilson level certification throughout the entire district. And what we expect is that we will start with this initial wave. Marcy's been leading this up. We have 14 teachers, but we'll look to grow that through the years too. When you hear about foundations, that's the elementary part of this. And then, we'll end up having to grow it through the entire year.
When we, I'm sorry, just to add on to that, when we approved the foundations, this is being paid from the grant dollars that we've had. This was part of the original proposal for that grant. So the board did see that and approve the budget. This is just the extras of the lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Have we identified the 14 teachers?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're identified. Okay.
Might we see a copy of who that would be?
Sure.
Did we add a second person like we discussed out of curriculum at high school? We're only doing one, I think. Did we?
For right now, yeah.
Okay.
It's a lot of time and dedication for a teacher too, so we have to make sure that they're agreeing to it as well too. So we have at least one person at the high school now. Every building has at least one, and in most cases more. But yeah, we can get you a list.
And then can you pull someone from one of the other schools to help at the high school, or?
You can, but
I mean, I
it's kind of hard, it's disruptive to do that. But in an emergency, you probably could do that. But I think our better course would be get this first
Okay.
line, and then we need to start expanding because people will retire or leave or whatever, and we need to make sure we have more Wilson certified staff. We need a K-12. But I'll get you a list.
Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Next resolution is 23-03-046, creation of a 0.5 or half-time school psychologist position.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Can we
I'll
get a
second.
second?
I briefly referenced this before, but there'll be no increase in cost for the board. This is just a shifting from our contract services to a personnel 001 line.
Any questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
All right. Do we have any other comments from the board? Anything else anyone wants to update on?
Just want to thank all the staff for giving the extra supplements to the students, and the students for participating, and the parents for getting them to where they need to be and picking them up, or just supporting them attending this during the day, because we all know that students love to get that extra help sometimes, so they need a little push from mom and dad. And want to also highlight that I went to the Right to Read Week Dr. Seuss event. That was very fun. I saw so many families there. My favorite game was probably the Boggle in the center of the room. They were playing Boggle. And it was fun to see the kids try to pronounce the nonsense words in the fish station. Thank you for inviting me.
Anything else? Again, those that are retiring tonight, we do sincerely appreciate it. And while we'll see you over the next few months, so it'll be a somewhat long goodbye for us. I'm sure those that have calendars on their walls counting down the days. But Dr. Wagner, do you have anything additional?
Just a couple things to go through. We talked a little bit about the levy tonight and how that impacts. One of the things that, through latest interpretation, we have to be very clear, we don't advocate, but we're allowed to provide informational aspects to the public. So we have a frequently asked questions, and that's been published. Mr. McDonald's help with that. If the board has any other questions, I would imagine that's going to be an evolving document because things will come up. Like we already addressed in there already. What about Intel? And we talked about that a little bit tonight. So I appreciate everyone's review of that. And if you have other items, please send them my way. Send people our way, and Kim and I will work on that, and then we'll continue to keep that updated. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then Mrs. Brewer talked about this a little bit. General Miles, just a quick update there. Spending a lot of time on that important project. Mr. McDonald's done a great job with 2 videos, and it really does center us, I think, more about why this is important. And we look at our hometown heroes, and this is a man who passed away over 60 years ago, and we're still talking about his deeds. So I think that means something. Legally, and we have to be careful how much we say publicly, but I can talk a little bit about it. Had a good partnership with the city and Johnstown Greater Parks and Rec, but things are not looking in a positive direction with the legal process right now. It's public, so I can say this, but everyone's been removed as a potential interested party right now, except for the AG's office and the trustee. So, we'll look to see what can be done there. Again, we only talk about so much legally. On a more positive note, and Mrs. Board's been very helpful with this, and Mr. Jenny has, and Mrs. Smith and others, but we actually are starting a memorial or a room dedication. So some of General Miles' effects we'll be able to display. Mrs. Board's been able to get us some furniture and some display cases and all. So working on that now. Mr. Jenny's been working with Mrs. Smith and making sure the room's ready. So we have some areas that have been drywalled and getting ready to paint. Also, it'll be a good living mini museum, if you will, but also a conference room. So it'll be good to have groups in and out. We could have the Legion eventually come in, and we're talking about having a groundbreaking maybe next month. And maybe next month having a groundbreaking and all, and it's a room that could be available to others. But I think it reminds us the importance of why we're here and those who have helped us get to this point in many different ways.
I appreciate the videos were fantastic, and even though I've, over the last several years, I've learned a lot about General Miles. When I see the videos and read some more, I learn more every time, and it's even more impressive every time you see what he accomplished. So it's quite amazing when you think that somebody of that stature was living right here in Johnstown. I mean, it's really impressive. So I think what we're doing is right. I think what we're doing here at the school and creating a museum is what's should be done in this community. You have to recognize somebody of that stature for his accomplishments, and I think regardless of what happens in the court system, we have a responsibility to dedicate space to somebody of this level. So I do appreciate the work on this.
Yeah, thank you. It's really been a team effort. So I think Mrs. Board's been the most. They're representing the board, but just a lot of research, a lot of work, but a lot of good teammates, like you said, Mr. McDonald.
I think it's fascinating. The more you learn about his life and the more you see the relationship to Johnstown. I've been looking at it for many years, but I've also learned a great deal in the last year and a half as I've tracked family members. So it's exciting. For some of you who remember Emerson's funeral home here in town, I spoke to Mark Emerson the other day, and he filled me in on a lot of interesting facts about General Miles and how he would stand at his home and be able to see him and see the nature. He was always generally dressed in white, which was interesting. He did go to the Methodist Church here, and he did walk through the streets of Johnstown quite often. So we do have a hero in our midst, and we have many heroes as we begin to look at the Bigelow Cemetery. We know the number of people that have been buried there are our forefathers who made Johnstown the great community that it is. We'll see more of that in the future in our history room. I'm going to call it certainly a tribute to General Miles, but I also think it's just a history room that we don't want to miss as we learn about our community. So thanks, Janet, for all your patience and dust and looking good. Yeah, right.
All right. Anything else?
Just a couple other things real quick. Continue the strong partnership with the city and working on municipal growth model, talking about compensation agreements, some more to come on that. So we do appreciate that. I want to highlight again the staff who are leaving. I haven't worked with them long, but just to have so many years of experience, as you said, Mr. Swager, that's a lot of people leaving, and some we're not letting leave. They can come back and sub at least. We'll get you the paperwork on that. And do appreciate, like Mrs. Thomas said, that I know the board's very busy. You have a personal life in addition to all the time you dedicate, but when you come out to events, it seems like we have board members that present at some of these events, and I think that's really very much appreciated. I think everything else you're aware of that I haven't, probably in the weekly report. So I think that's it, unless you have questions.
Do we have a need for executive session?
We do. We actually have 3 items. One is no vote. There would not be a vote on any of these 3 right now, but the one for consideration of employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, compensation of a public employee. We have another reason for consideration of purchase of property for public purposes, or sale or disposition of unneeded, obsolete, or unfit property, competitive bidding. I'll read all that, you can read it. And then the last one is discussion with the board's legal counsel of disputes involving the board that are subject to pending or imminent court action. So we have 3 reasons.
All right, if I can get a motion for executive session.
So moved. Oh, sorry.
Fine. I was waiting for someone.
You can second it
Okay.
now,
I'll
Alan.
second it.
All right. Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Brewer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Going into executive section at 6:29 with no action